Well, we're here with the Strangers in a Strange Land podcast. We're interviewing Biaka. And Biaka, tell us about yourself. Where did you come from and where are you? And what's your story?
Yeah, I'll start off with the fact that I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, not in Kansas City, Missouri. And I'm originally from India, Northeast in the Mizoram region, which is bordering Bangladesh and Myanmar or Burma. And I was born there, grew up there for about 18 months. Then my folks got offered an opportunity to go to the island of Taiwan. And, what was supposed to be like a 2-year trip for their missionaries. They're part of the Presbyterian church there. What was part of a 2-year exchange program. They just picked up Mandarin really fast and quickly became 18 to 20 years for me and 25 years for them. So I'm in a myriad of things and ended up in Kansas City, Missouri at 35. So yeah.
How did you get from Taiwan to Missouri? Like, what was that? Did you go straight to Kansas City, or was there like a step on the way, education, or?
Well, yeah, it was education. So like when I was in Taiwan, I went to like this American international school with like a lot of other missionary kids, business kids. We got kids from like America, US, New Zealand, Australia, everywhere, and kind of applied for the school called Redding, North California. Spent a year there, did not do well, left, and then a buddy of mine was living in Joplin, Missouri. Really small, fourth biggest city in Missouri, and never heard of it. Never wanted to live anywhere in the U.S. other than East Coast or West Coast. And he said, "Why don't you just come check out Joplin, Missouri?" I get out there for school. And the moment I got out of the airport in Tulsa, drove through over to Joplin, I was like, I'm out of here in like a month. I can't stand it.
So for people that don't know, Tulsa's in Oklahoma, Joplin's in Missouri. So you flew into another state and then drove across.
Right.
Yep.
That was like in 2006. And that was like before the Joplin airport, I think, really had, or I just didn't have a flight. But anyways, like I grew up in a city in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, I grew up in Taiwan, which is just big metropolis. Great people. We got mountains, we got the ocean, and here I am. I landed in the middle of nowhere in Missouri, and I just see flat. It's just flat, and I got there like in the winter, so it was also just kind of everything was brown and gray. And I was driving through Joplin, and Joplin's like made its main street really cool now. It's really hip. They've made it really cool, but back then it was just kind of boarded up buildings, and I was like, where am I at? I'm out of here, like really. And so that was in 2006. So 2006, landed in Joplin, Missouri. And then, what was supposed to be just 1 month hang out there became quickly 11 years where, I went to school, made lots of friends, kind of got into what I do now with design. And also met my wife there. So yeah.
Excellent. And now I've known you for a little while, and
yeah.
What's remarkable about your story is also that, at least to me, is remarkable. You do not sound like you're from Taiwan or India at all.
Okay. So I even tried the stereotypical accent, like Indian accent or Asian accent. And my wife's always like, no, that's not how. No, my wife is a small blonde Welsh English Missouri girl from Kansas City, so she's like doing these like stereotypical impersonations way better than I am. And the reason why is my folks were just like, hey, watch movies, listen to music. I remember my mom was like, hey, the most important thing you can do is pick up the accent. So for a while there, a lot of our friends in Taiwan, they're from Texas or Alabama or Georgia. We literally just kind of pick up that kind of accent. And then once I lived in Arkansas, Oklahoma, worked in Manford, Oklahoma for a bit as a lifeguard, you start picking up that accent. It's just part of that survival, living in another culture, in another world with other people. If you don't sound like them, it's pretty easy to pinpoint that you're from somewhere else.
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
So
that's great.
you mentioned your mum. How did your parents feel about you picking up and going to the US?
My folks, so my mom has always been fairly international minded. Her name is actually Sap Bangi, which is a really kind of funny term. It just literally means, Sap means foreign, or foreign, and then Bang means country. So her name just means foreign country. So,
Wow.
like coincidentally, like
Right.
they moved from India when she was like 33, 34, with 2 kids under 2, and then moved to Taiwan. And then now their kids are all over the world. Like my brother and my sister are in Taiwan. He's married in Taiwan, about to have a kid, and I'm in the US. They, they love it. We're doing great. I think they're happy about that. As parents, they're always happy about that. I think there's always that tinge of where now I've got 2 kids, so they don't get to see their grandkids, and we're in the middle of COVID. So I would say that COVID and grandkids has punctuated the distance that we have.
Yep.
And I think that's definitely one of the hardship of just being an international, global citizen, in this global village. But they're happy. They're happy about who we are, where we are. They love our spouses. My wife is very connected to my tribal and my indigenous culture. And, she's putting together a little, ABC book with our Mizo alphabet with my mother. So they're very close. So we benefit we benefit having WhatsApp, Facebook, Messenger, everything. That's made it easier. It's always hard too. But I think grandkids and COVID has really punctuated the distance. So
I'm sure it has.
yeah.
Damon, I'm going to leap up to the next question. This is one that I really like. I like asking people, what has shocked you about moving to where you moved to? Like, what are the things that stand out in your memory and still you're kind of in disbelief about them?
So, I am born in the mountains of India, rural India. Okay. And we live in Taiwan, and the idea of all of my friends around me are from mostly major metropolitan in the US, or associate mostly with LA or New York. My best buddy lives in New York City and grew up there. So the idea that when I first landed in the Midwest, like, a lot of my friends were like, dude, haven't you heard of like Mississippi Burning, the movie, things like that. And they're like,
I actually watched that the other day.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. And everything. And like, and it was like, they were like, what about the Ku Klux Klan? What about KKK? What about racism? And as like an international kid kind of going into like the US, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, that's kind of scary, but I really had no idea what to expect. I think California was Northern California is so different from the rest of California. I mean, California is just massive. And so that was almost kind of like a tutorial or a demo for landing in the Midwest. I think what's most shocking about the Midwest was more of the fact that I dived into a more of an insular, conservative, Bible, Christian community. Like I am a religious person, I am Christian, but it was a whole different kind of like world. Like, we say Bible Belt, I mean, it's the belt buckle right there. I mean, Texas is the other belt. I mean, Texas, the boots, Missouri feels like the giant belt buckle. I mean, I think what was most shocking was just, I missed the food. I missed walking around night markets at night for a long time, for years.
Back in Taiwan, you missed the food there, yeah?
Oh, I missed the food. I could talk about the food all
we're going to get to that. Don't worry. We're going to get to that later, yeah.
Yeah. And it just, like your internal clock, like as a kid, I remember telling my friends, I was like, yeah, I was 14 and I was like jumping on a bus at like 3 a.m. because we just got done bowling, and then having like midnight, hot pot, and then jumping on the bus because it's completely safe in Taiwan, and I'm just going to go home, and it's a Saturday. Like in the US, I'm like, I guess I'll go to Walmart, at 1 o'clock just to walk around, like,
yeah.
One of the funny things was that I would get homesick for Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year's, and I would love to go to Black Friday, also just because I also like shopping anyways. But I love that busyness, the denseness of people that you don't ever get in like Joplin, Missouri, but you get it during Black Friday. And my friends would just be like, we hate this. And I'm like, I love this. This is like,
I know it's crazy. Yeah. Like everyone, like, cause I'm from Missouri, and
yeah,
when I talk to people like, they love that I live in in a major city, and I've lived in other, I've lived in London and Singapore and things like that, and I'm in Sydney, and they envy that. But at the same time, whenever they go to places like that, they hate how busy they are. And I'm like, I
Oh,
like the contrast of going home where it's quiet, but then also like where the action is, like being in the middle of it is great.
yeah, I have become that guy because my wife, she grew up in the country south of Kansas City, and I've really come to appreciate. I like, you can't live in the United States since 2006 in Missouri and not be okay with some of this rural life, or to enjoy kind of the more, comparatively. I'm not dissing Missouri. It's just there's rural life, and then there's the life that I grew up with in the urban city of Taiwan. And there's a good marriage of in between those two. But every once in a while, I really crave that, just the din of people walking, moving, doing their own thing, and just the sound of a crowd, I really enjoyed that. So for a long time, it was just, Black Fridays. My joke with my friends is like, you know what we call Black Friday in Taiwan? They're like, what? I was like, Tuesday night.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
So yeah, so that was probably one of the biggest culture shock, was just the lack of people.
Yep.
And then also probably the lack of you just need a vehicle everywhere, especially in the Midwest, in the US. Public transportation is non-existent. So I got very good about incentivizing friends to give me rides, or quickly learning how to jump into a dorm room and borrow a car key from a friend, who was like, yep, doing homework or something like that. So yeah.
That's cool. Did you know how to drive before you got to the US?
I didn't. Nope. Actually, yeah, that's another crazy thing, because growing up in Taiwan, we learned to ride our scooters around. My folks were, really just poor missionaries in Taiwan, and cars are like, what, 300%, we just never drove. And they had this horrible, horrible Ford Escort that, didn't have the power steering or anything. And my first car I ever drove was a Nissan Maxima from one of my professors, which I eventually bought for like $1,000, my first car. I remember when my parents came for my wedding and they saw my car, and they're just like, oh my gosh, you did it. Like, you got this massive, awesome car. I'm like, yeah, it's a 11-year-old, Nissan,
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I had to pick up driving, and I picked it up pretty fast. I'd say that when I go back to Taiwan or India, I'll never drive. I can't drive in those roads. Like, my brother just kills it, turns on a dime. For me, I'm just like, nope, I need like a lot more space to turn.
Yep.
So
We adapt. You talked about food, which is one of our favorite topics. Every time I travel, I follow food around. People are like, oh, how was this country? And I'm like, I ate this and this.
Yes.
And this. So tell me what you miss the most about home, like which food you miss the most, or food. If you can have it right now, what would it be?
Oh, if I can have it right now. I can have it right now. Okay. It would be, there's like these like less than $10 hot pot grill combination. And there's just these giant fridges, like those drink fridges you see in like the gas stations, like QT or something like that.
Yep.
Except it's lined with like vegetables and thinly sliced briskets, pork, chicken, and like mushrooms and veggies. And yeah, my buddies and I would just go skateboarding, grab a 6-pack of like Taiwan beer, head over there, and it just, you would make this hot pot. You'd boil the veggies, you'd get your own sauces. I just love that because it was just any combination of food. Because if you grow up in Taiwan, you're gonna enjoy broth. You're gonna enjoy that really like umami flavor of like the seafood paste, like our satay, which is like this popular like seafood-based, barbecue sauce. And it's just a plethora mixture of meat and vegetables and good friends and a nice, lager, and then even eating that during a hot summer day just kind of like cooled you down. Like, and everything costs like less than $10, and I will say at that time, like, I could eat anything and stay my weight. If I did that for about a week, I think I'd probably like balloon in size. But I miss that, and as always, I miss Taiwanese breakfast. They just have great savory breakfast.
Like
I could go on and on.
What's in a savory breakfast in Taiwan?
They've got these things which is kind of like it's like a rice flour based crepe with an omelet kind of built into it, and they would fold it, and sometimes they would put bacon, sausages, or corn, and then you cut it up and put a little sweet paste on it. And then, you know, people diss soy milk, but Taiwanese soy milk is just amazing. Like none of this silk garbage you get in the US. You know, that's just horrible stuff. You get this amazing flavored soy milk. You get like little fried dough inside of a rice bowl. I mean, there's just so many variations. Like Taiwanese breakfast, and you could get really full for about $3, $4.
That's awesome.
That's great.
It's just, yeah, I think it comes down to the convenience, the ingenuity, the flavor, and there was just something always around. Like, you know, if you want to grab a quick bite in the US or something like that, you're probably looking at going to a fast food restaurant or store. You know, like there's just so many street stalls and everything. Like there's something everywhere for less than $2.
That's the thing about, you know, especially like living in the Midwest, you don't get the diversity. It's usually large chains that are kind of are franchises, and it's not fresh food. Whereas, you know, you go to a big city like Singapore or something, you got all these street stalls, and it's a fusion of a lot of different flavors and you know, origins of food have come together, and it's fantastic. So speaking of Missouri food, like what have you latched onto being in the US?
Barbecue and Tex-Mex food. I mean, I'm in Kansas City, and briskets, man. Oh my gosh, briskets and burnt ends. Arthur Bryant's my jam. I love Q39. You know,
tell me what these things are, because a lot of people are going to know what they are.
Okay, so I'm going to probably butcher it. So if anyone's listening to this, just Google these things: burnt ends, briskets. But pretty much these are burnt ends are I think the butt or the butt of the pork butt, which is kind of like not actually the butt, but like the shoulder area near the ribs above. And what they do is they smoke them with lots of flavors, and they just smoke them in the oven, sort of like a Steven's going to know this way better.
For a very long time.
For a very long time. And so the smoke flavor gets in there, and then what they usually cut out of it is like these briskets, which are these like thin, really juicy, flavorful kind of cuts of meat. But at the very end, there's these like kind of like little burnt parts, which is what Kansas City is known for, which is called burnt ends. And so they are almost kind of like, they're like candied cube, because they're usually flavored with barbecue sauce, which is mostly a ketchup-based sauce. Sometimes there's honey, and with the kind of wood that you smoke it with, that flavor gets into there. And the flavor, what it does is it just covers the meat, seeps into it, and it makes the whole entire meat taste like barbecued, smoky, sweet, you know, rich, tender. I mean, I'm thinking about it's falling apart. And this is the thing.
My mouth is watering.
Yeah. And then you get that with some great ribs, and just genuinely amazingly different experience and services based on, I mean, like if you're in America, you're going to talk about, if you know barbecue, you're going to talk about what region you support. If you're from Kansas City, you're going to talk about which restaurants you support. And I just love the history of barbecue. I love the history of barbecue in Kansas City. And it's just, this is the one food that no one can replicate anywhere else. So yeah, I miss Taiwanese food. I miss all that. But if I ever leave this region, I will be dreaming of barbecue, Kansas City barbecue, for a very long time.
Have you introduced any Taiwanese food to your friends, and what was their reaction to that?
I've always tried to cook food in Joplin. So whenever I cook food, it was kind of like what I remember, because kind of the stereotypical joke of Asian cooking, Taiwanese cooking, or, you know, other Chinese cooking, is that you don't ever measure anything. You just kind of like have an idea of what to toss into there. Yeah. So I remember I've just got friends, like one of my buddies, Andrew, will not eat onions, will not eat mushrooms, because he's genuinely allergic to mushrooms. But I would prepare meals for them, and it would be probably 3/4 of it would be vegetable based, different variations of vegetables. And usually I think Midwest, they're thinking steam it and throw a glop of fake cheese on it,
Yeah.
or just bake it or something like that. And I would stir fry them. I would saute them. I would do different flavors with them. I made pork belly, other things like that. And they demolished everything. Like the rice too. It's just one of those things where I don't think I will ever diss certain food just because I grew up in Taiwan and I also came to the US. So I love Panda Express and I love other, local Chinese variations or styles that the US has. But when you taste like more of a home cooked Asian style Chinese or Taiwanese style cooking, it's a very different variation of what you expect from over here. So they've loved it. And my favorite thing is making hot pot for my friends at home. So
I love hot pot, and I grew up in the north of Australia, so a lot of Southeast Asian food. I really relate to what you're saying. So I want to ask this question because it really hit me. Hot pot is a slow food. It's slow eating. You sit there with people and you talk for hours and you don't feel full or over, stuffed at the end. And America is all about getting, convenience. And I lived there for the past 6 years. So it's about convenience and it's great. You can just get anything you want when you want it. How do you deal with that dichotomy, like the slow food versus the fast food?
I think a lot of times food, like if we're going to talk about food, you're talking about context, you're talking about culture, you're talking about adaptation, because I think that if the stereotype is that Americans want to quickly eat and go, I mean, that's also what's so popular about Taiwanese breakfast as well too. I think that when we do hot pot and we have friends over and it's for like Christmas, like on Christmas I try to eat hot pot if I'm not hanging out with my in-laws, or for New Year's, and we contextualize it in that it's a slow cooked meal. We gather together. We start with like easy wine, and then we drink beer, and then we have other things to go with it. And then we take a break, and then we savor the noodles that we throw into the hot pot. And it becomes a process. Like it's so much fun because, like you said, yes, it is very different from eating like, say, at a buffet or even like a potluck after church or something like that. But it's how you contextualize and how you bring the guests into the experience. And my favorite thing is just watching my friends kind of like scoot their chair back just a little bit, lean backwards, and then take a drink, and then keep going with the conversation as, our other friends are dipping more stuff in there just to cook a little bit because now they've savored those flavors. It's almost at the second half of the dinner that the dinner gets fun with hot pot, because people are in their comfort zone now. That soup, that broth, that food, it's going to slow everyone down. It doesn't even matter if I have to set the pretense for it. They just dive into that vibe, and I love it. Yeah, it's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah,
that's really cool. Maybe we should make this an expat food show, Jim.
Hey, I'm not opposed. I'm not opposed to that.
I am so hungry right now, and I'm planning on eating for lunch in the back of my head.
Oh, good.
So I have a question that is, I guess, another one that's close to my heart. It's off food. It's not food though. How do you deal with being exotic, different, all that kind of stuff? Like here, Jim is what I call a Yank. So we're like Yankophiles if we hang around with them. But in Seattle, they were the Anglophiles, and they loved the South Africans and the Australian accent and stuff like that. How were you treated? Were you welcomed? Was it a novelty? Was it good? Negativity? When you went to Kansas? Okay.
Well, I mean, it's more, my experience is mostly in Joplin. I think when we went to Kansas City, Kansas City is just, a bigger bigger urban area, bigger area in general. And Joplin, where I was at, was, primarily lower and upper middle class white folks. And, I think a lot of it was just, if you're not an American who is a person of color, the differences stands out to you more as like, oh yeah, I am a, anomaly, or I am special. Like when I first got to the US, I, if I may speak very frankly, like politically and, belief wise, I was, more fairly aligned with most of the people in Joplin, which is more of a conservative, way of thinking. And I think that as a person and myself developing within the United States, and seeing myself reflected in the people that I listen to, everything just, it went from, oh, it's fun to be an anomaly, to this is getting kind of tiring, to, oh, I don't want to be different, to I really love who I am now, and I really want to know more about myself. And that is further accelerated by a wife who is highly supportive. I mean, my wife is a global traveler. She's lived in China before. She went to school in Melbourne. She has encouraged us to understand our identity, understand my heritage. We met at a church in religious backgrounds, and it doesn't mean that like, one of my favorite things is that I'm still very much myself. I still talk about everything I want to talk about, being who I am, without falling into any stereotype that makes me uncomfortable, And I think that it used to be like, ha ha ha, let's laugh about my name, to, no, you want to know my name's meaning? I'll tell you about it. Or else, like, I'm just not going to sit back. I'll let you know what I think if I'm annoyed, Yep. So the novelty aspect of just being a foreigner or being somebody different. I mean, I've got long hair, and, I sound like an American. I've got a very different name. There's many experiences. And I would say a lot of them have gone from not understanding the context of, something racial going on, to understanding better how to stand up for myself, or how I view. And I think it's an interesting time to have these discussions, especially in the US, with all of the, well, in the US in general, but especially with the recent, happenings of like Black Lives Matter or Asian Lives Matter, a lot of these issues. So I think globally right now in the US, right now locally in the US in Missouri, I feel comfortable. I stand out. I'm different, and I have really enjoyed speaking different perspective to other people who primarily never would have listened to that kind of like other perspective. So
I may never have met someone like you.
Right. I think like one of my jokes is like, I am like, to a racist, I'm like I'm like a Bud Light. I'm like the starter drink. I got the accent. I understand American jokes. I'm like the first stage for a racist person to kind of get comfortable with somebody of a different.
You're the gateway.
I'm the gateway. Yeah.
You're the gateway to tolerance, right?
Yeah, I'm the gateway to tolerance. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm tolerance light. Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Yeah,
so
I'm tolerance light. Yeah.
That's actually one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and most people, is what are the things that you think that you've helped other people better understand about the world outside of where they're from? Because a lot of people, especially in Missouri, and I imagine Joplin, because I'm from a town that's about the size of Joplin in Missouri as well, they make a lot of assumptions about what the world is really like, and they think they know what the world's really like. What have you shattered, in a good way or a bad way, whatever, about that for some people? Like, you have a story, or something that frequently happens when you bring it up?
I think one of the big things was just, and we talk a lot of these things, so I'll just be open, because like, it's when when Ferguson first happened, there was a lot of people who were just like, no, like, the cops were right, the kid did wrong, why are people rioting? Why are people?
Are you talking about the Michael Brown?
The Michael Brown, yeah, the Michael Brown
in Ferguson, Missouri.
Yep. Yeah, which kind of kickstarted a lot of the Black Lives Matter perspective in 2016, and the conversation about police brutality in the United States against persons of color. At that stage in life, it was kind of a change from me saying like, oh yeah, I can defend the Civil War for the Confederates. I understand. I understand states' rights. And I was taught a lot of these kind of ideologies, and, was able to say like, yeah, I'm above this conversation. I can talk about it. To the more time I spent in the United States, the more time I kind of read things for myself, kind of the association with like, oh, well, actually I'm a person of color. And actually morally, I feel like we need to defend people and their history. And then I started reading more about, slavery in the United States in the 1600s, just the transatlantic trade and everything like that. You change your perspective. And so a lot of times it's kind of like, I have friends saying like, oh yeah, I don't know why they kneel at a game during the national anthem. I don't know why they say Black Lives Matter. And I said, well, I'm not American, but here's some thoughts, think about this. And so one of those situations was like, hey, think about like what kids are being taught. Like I work with middle schoolers in Joplin, with the lower income middle schoolers. And I would say like, there's a reason why they pinpoint and pick on this one kid in our group who's, Hispanic. And I said, it's because that's the easiest thing to point at, because everything else in their life is really hard. And there's always some sort of scapegoat system that we can make. And every country has it, from Taiwan to India, even Mizos ourselves, it's systematic. We want to find a way to scapegoat. We want to find a way to be xenophobic and to systematically classify and, pretty much dehumanize people in order for something that we do to be normalized or better for our advantages.
It's interesting you say that, because I've often thought, and just from experience talking to people that have finally gone overseas, when they go to a country, when they see a minority, being treated that way in another country, then they're like, oh, they see it, but they can't contextualize it in the country they're in and their participation in it. Like it's and it's so leaving, that's why I say get out of the country and go see the world, because you're not really going to be able to, reference or contextualize the things that you're seeing in your day-to-day life until you see it happen to somebody else.
Yeah. And it's not to diss all of Missouri. Like, I mean, a big part of who I am is defined by the fact that I lived here. To define myself is to understand the generosity, the kindness, the incredible openness of the people that I've met. But the interesting part of it is that in the openness and in our kindness, every person has some sort of underlying stereotypical or, just kind of a thought that needs to be challenged. And the question of who you are as a person should be determined by how well do you stand under scrutiny when your values are questioned, or basic beliefs or foundations of things that make your life are asked about, those basic things, like what was slavery? What was the civil rights movement? Oh, that was only like 50, 60 years ago. And then let's talk about Taiwan, how we treated, the indigenous people of Taiwan. And then how did Mizos treat other people who come into their territory? Or how does India treat Mizos? I mean, it's cyclical, it's global, it's everywhere. And the thing that I will always say is that we need to practice an empathy that challenges kind of the cores of our principle. And I agree, like this podcast, for the sake of it, is about expatriates moving to other countries and living somewhere else. But I want to go off to say that this podcast is more about being able to take yourself out of the context that you were raised or brought up in, and then situating yourself in a place where you have to then recontextualize yourself either on the exterior only, but as you do that, it causes you to think about who you are as a person. And I think that's the interesting thing about living in other culture, is that when the exterior is so uncomfortable, you start asking who you are in the inside. And that's not a bad thing.
So how did you think you changed the most? Because that's a good segue into that question. What's changed about you the most from your experience?
I wanted to be as unoffensive, as easygoing, as okay, yes, man, to everything, make everybody love me, to me saying to a friend of mine, like, I don't like that song, please don't say that word, to saying like, yo, I used to say that word. Like, it's like, I don't want to say woke, but it's just something awoken inside of me where it was like, I'm Mizo, this is my heritage, these are my background, these are my people, this is how I got into this country, this is how I stayed and got married in this country, this is how I'm being a part and helping this country, my community, my adopted country. these are my children who are born here and they're Americans. And these are the things I want them to know about myself and the blood that they carry from all the way across the ocean. Like that context is what I'm saying, is that you've been taken so out of context that there's this kind of like stumbling, awkward period where it's almost kind of like another whole cultural what is it? When you're becoming a teenager and you're becoming an adult,
puberty.
You're going through a cultural puberty. You really are. If you're going to stay in another culture for a long time, you're going to awkwardly meander through different groups, friends, different pockets of hobbies, different pockets of interest, until you finally figure out after years that, oh, I can comfortably be myself still, and still, take things that I've picked up during this process to become who I am now in this culture, and call it home. I think that's when you realize you call it home, is where you're so awkward and you acknowledge the awkwardness, but you've also moved out of that searching, meandering, that kind of teenage years of recontextualizing yourself to, where you're at. So that's how I feel. I feel at home now. I feel comfortable with who I am. And I feel that there's going to be more changes and experience in my life with where I am, who I am, where I'm at, literally, physically where I'm at. And that's the biggest thing that's changed. I'm not looking for the next thing anymore. I'm just happily being here and accepting, new challenges and new ventures.
That's great.
That's great. So from that, does that mean you're a forever ever expatriate? Are you going to pack up and go to another country, or
I don't know. I think I grew up with American culture my whole life. I grew up with Americans my whole life. I grew up with that. I think about the fact that one of the things I do really always am jealous of my friends, like from Topeka, is that they've got these tight-knit group of guys who all had nicknames, and they all go back for Thanksgiving or Christmas. And I don't really have that. And I like that for my kids. And I think that we will always be looking to travel, to expand their mind and their perspective. But I'd like my kids to have a little bit more of anchor, a little bit more of a harbor to, come home to. So I think for now, we are happily calling Kansas City home. So short answer is, well, this is probably going to be home base for a while. But I will always call Mizoram and Taiwan home.
Has this experience, what's changed about your view of home? And Taiwan's home, right? And India's not home. Is that how you see it?
It's like a little bit of both. Home is where where your loved ones are. Yeah.
So how does your time in living in America change your view of Taiwan and India?
Like, it's made me really, like, when I was a kid, I remember thinking like, oh, that's so corny. Like in Taiwan, I'm a graphic designer, UX designer, and when I was a kid, I would used to look at Taiwan and be like, oh man, why are they like making everything cartoony? Why are they making everything chibi, which is like a Japanese term for making something cute? Like even our mayoral race in Taiwan, they made the mayor look all cute and everything. And I used to think that was so corny. And once I got to the States, was like, yeah, I want to be like a designer like this and design like that, design like all my favorite American designers, design old school tattoos and everything. It's like in the past 3 years where I've been like, oh yeah, like Taiwan was like on the forefront. They were doing this stuff. They were designing this stuff. Kids were wearing these clothes. Like I'm really into like streetwear and fashion. And I just really come to appreciate and think like, all these clothes are selling for thousands of dollars by these different streetwear brands and that rappers are wearing. Like they literally look like night market clothes that we would laugh at when we were kids, So it's made, like, what is it? Like the grass is always greener on the other side. And I just didn't know how green it was when I was over there, So, but when I go home to Taiwan or I'm in India, like, I miss Joplin. Like Joplin is still my hometown USA. I'm based in Kansas City now, but Joplin was also where I called home for 11 years. So it just really helps. Like wherever I go, I'm glad I can always think of something I miss or love about the place I left.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
great.
I understand that. And it's so weird having so many homes. You feel honored, but you're also always missing someone.
Yeah.
Like, all the time, every time. Like you said, home is where your loved ones are.
It really is. Yeah. It's kind of going back to food real quick, is it's hard to leave anywhere, because everywhere you leave, you're thinking of the food you can't get that was from over there,
Yeah.
And so that's the same thing with family. Like I have the hardest time leaving any place after I visit. It's those long goodbyes. It's those goodbyes that my kids will be annoyed of forever. Like those, all right, we'll see you later. And then an hour later, you're still talking by the car. Goodbyes,
Yeah. When was the last time you were in Taiwan?
Last time I was in Taiwan was for my brother's wedding, so 2017.
Right. And your kids were not born at that point?
No, they weren't. No,
Yep.
no. Yeah.
Yep.
We had them in 19 and also this year, 21. So they haven't seen India or Taiwan. So hopefully things clear up hopefully things clear up by the time that they're a little more manageable on the airplane.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hoping for.
For those long haul flights, they have the screens on the backs of the seats. So
right. Yeah. And that's what I'm training. That's what I'm training them to do. Enjoy little screens on TV,
You just put them in a cupboard, give them a little screen.
Yeah. People say it's bad, but I'm like, I'm a nervous flyer, Jim, we talked about this. So I'm like, hey, look, if I just have to think about myself and the kids are watching whatever on Netflix, that's fine with me. Like it's a flight, we're flying in a giant metal box in the air. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, that's cool.
That's great.
So I think we should get to the part of the show that I'm always waiting for, the part of the podcast, which is the final questions. Jim, I think you should go through these. And I'll make sure I count, because we have a whole lot, but we only want to do 10.
So I gotta go rapid fire. I can't do long expositions. Okay.
You can, but don't think too much.
Don't think too much. And and the ideas from, I don't know if you ever watched The Actors Studio. James Lipton used to ask some questions at the end, and we're ripping on that off a little bit. We're not going to ask the same questions, but we want the same kind of energy. So I think you've probably already answered this one, but what did you miss from home? What do you miss from home the most?
I miss my family. I miss my parents.
Yep.
My brother, my sister, and food. Yep.
Of course. If you were to go back, what would you miss?
If I were to go back, what would I miss? I would miss watching local sports. I would watch briskets and barbecue. I would miss my friends in Joplin and my in-laws.
Yep. Excellent. Yep. And what makes you cringe about home now that you have been abroad?
Oh, what makes me cringe about home? Some of the social ways we treat people of LGBTQIA plus background, some of the ways that we treat immigrants, and some of the perspectives or grudges that we hold in political sense. And yeah, those are really deep answers.
No,
cringe wise, probably not too much, but yeah, just some of those old school things. There's some pretty deep underlying.
No, that's fair.
Yeah.
What makes you cringe about the country you live in now?
Oh man, same stuff.
Yeah. It's like you were saying before, it's in every country, right? So
yeah.
What's the food you're going to introduce everyone to back home if you could? And I suspect I know the answer to this, but
yeah, it's barbecue BurntEnds. Yep.
What is the biggest myth about your home country?
Biggest myth about my home country. I'm trying to think.
Do people assume something of you, and then you're like, yeah, we're just not like that. Like Australians always get it. We do not ride kangaroos.
Taiwan is not Thailand. We speak Mandarin.
Yep, there you go.
Interesting thing is, a lot of people sometimes from India don't really know where Mizoram is. So Mizoram is a part of India. Yes, we are Indians. And no, we aren't all living in a village. We actually have some pretty big cities. And yep.
Cool.
What's the biggest myth about the country you live in? You know, something maybe was shattered for you when you moved to America.
You know what? In the context of how everybody might view or hear about America, or I'll say specifically Midwest, incredibly friendly people. Incredibly friendly people. I think that the pockets of crazies that have come out to make a detriment of where home is in Missouri, I have been just smothered by kindness, generosity, and amazing people who just have really odd, ideologies about politics and some social issues. But I have been just hammered with kindness and generosity, and I have thrived because of people like that here in Missouri. So,
yep.
That's great.
Tawana, how many questions am I up to?
I think you're up to 8. I think you have 2 more. I think I lost count though. I'm a bad co-host.
You're a bad co-host. If you were to pick another country to go to for a short time, I know you're going to stay there for a while, but like, where would you want to go?
Turkey.
Really? To live or to visit?
Okay. So randomly on Instagram, I started following the Salt Bay guy, the guy who does the salt thing. He's Turkish. And then I quickly started following like random specific Turkish street foods. And they all create celebrityism out of it's really odd because like they take their one food and they really like develop like a character out of it. For like, there's a guy who has a curly hair mustache who looks like, a Super Mario character. Mm-hmm. And then he rings a little bell and then he scoops up chickpeas and rice, adds things into it. And he says in a very kind of fun little folky way, like, what's for dinner today? And then there's a guy who's always smiling. He's like pranking. He even showed up with like Khabib, the UFC fighter. Anyways, I'm really super into Turkey. Like I want to go and see the the Hagia Sophia, the mosque. Like I want to see everything about Turkey. I love Turkey's history. And I just spent hours on Instagram looking at Turkish food. Like
That's
Turkey,
awesome.
number one.
I want you to get a gimmick for a hot pot. So when you're doing hot pot, you have that gimmick that you have. Like, what's
my gimmick might just be the video goes on for hours and I'm just eating and I'm not even interacting. That if I had a gimmick for hot pot, I'd just be like, leave me alone. You can watch me eat, but I'm just gonna enjoy my hot pot.
Nice. Last question. In 1 minute, what's the advice you would give to anyone thinking about moving overseas?
If you think about moving overseas, the moment you land, journal for a month. If you're going to stay there for if you're going to stay there for a year, just journal for a month. Everything. Journal a month for everything you feel, and then when you realize you feel at home, get that journal out and read it, and then just kind of write how you're feeling right now. I did that and it's amazing. Like you are just filled with gratefulness. And I think that helps with homesickness. That helps with when you are sick of the place where you're at. That helps when you're thinking about, what your next steps are, either to stay or to go. I think that initial instinct or reaction is such a good way to kind of like set kind of a measure of where you're at. Because I think going overseas is not always fun and it's not always super hard, but it's, like I said, the journey has been so internal for me based on outward, just outward elements of where we are, that once you feel at home internally, you can kind of like, you should go back and read what you wrote. It'd be really interesting. So yeah.
Nice.
That is fantastic. I
That's
love
great
that
advice.
That is good.
Yeah.
I might just do that if I change cities even.
You should, yeah.
That's a great idea. Big life changes. Well,
yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. I not apart from being hungry, I've learned so much stuff. It was really good talking to you. Yeah, I mean, I hope your journey goes really, really well. I think your kids are going to be amazing global travelers, and that will be cool to see. I wonder if they will in 20 years or 18 years go off to somewhere else.
No, as much as I encourage people to travel and check out other places, my little girls, that pains me to think of them living even 10 minutes away from me. But yeah,
you just have to move wherever they go.
Right. I am pretty sure the Zaidarhzauva clans are cursed to travel the world. It's like we're the anti-Canes. We're enjoying it. Biblical term.
Yeah. Maybe you can get them into Turkey. Kill two.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, that'd be easy access then. Yeah. Maybe I'll be the Turkish hot pot king there.
Oh, do it.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else right now?
No, thanks so much. I appreciate you guys inviting me to your first episode or one that you're recording. And it's been really fun. I think it's really important to talk to expatriates and other people living in other countries because it's just so much fun. I enjoy it so much talking to other people with similar life experiences that are not exactly the same as mine. And it makes me feel less crazy. So that's the therapeutic part about what you guys are doing is you guys are going to make a lot of people feel less crazy.
That should be our byline. I'm actually willing to go with it.
Make you less crazy. I hope it encourages more people to do it as well.
For sure. Yeah. It's fun.
I'm grateful that you did this, and thank you for agreeing to do this.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate it.